The economy and jobs losses. As you may recall, James Finley Tea recently announced that they will be closing 2 farms. They're a tea processing factory. They will be closing 2 farms and effectively sending home over 1,000 workers by Christmas. They were meant to do this next year, December 2020, but the tea prices internationally forced them to push it forward by 1 year. If you want to know the state of the economy, between March and August, over 3,000 companies shut down, according to the Registrar of Companies. So this is where we are. The job losses in the country so far, over 4,300. Gashuri, we start with you. You know, what's going on with the economy, job losses? I mean, you know, how is it? We had Mohamed Belie here. How is it that you have an economy that's growing at 6.3% and you have job losses and no money in people's hands?
And that is what I would call a contradiction of sorts, because if the economy is growing, you would expect that individual companies are also growing. Other than the job losses, we've also seen various companies issue profit warnings. And this does not sit very well with our economy. And I always look at it in the broader sense. 1,000 people going home is not just about 1,000 people going home. It is 1,000 people plus, let's say, 3 people per person. So you're talking about at least 3,000 people who are benefiting from those 1,000 jobs, who are going to have to look for an alternative beginning January. And this is not a very good idea. Also, for an administration that came into power on the premise of creating job opportunities, then this is not very, very good. And maybe speaks to the entire question of what is the state of our economy. And I think as a country, we need an honest discussion about it, because it does not convince anyone that at the top there, we are being told the economy has grown. But at the same time, jobs are being lost, companies are folding up. Then where is the economy growing?
Yvonne, in fact, when you speak about job losses also, remember what's happening in Mombasa because of the SGR directive, that goods have to move using the SGR. Nazile trucks are barabarani. People cannot use them anymore, despite the directive having been reversed. Still, until as late as yesterday, and the day before yesterday, we had protests on the streets of Mombasa about the same issue, and we're having one every week. And you see, this is affecting economies, the economies and the economic activities of these towns, all the way from Mombasa, the Emalis of this world, the Voi of this world, because a lot of activities, those towns grew because of the activities along the road, the trains. That's one. And two, last week we spoke about the high rate of unemployment in Kenya, 7.4%, and a huge chunk of that is the youth. People. But I look at it this way, Yvonne, because now, as you say, that people are losing their jobs in Finland, if one person loses their job, 3 to 4 other people will be affected. I look at the rate of poverty, the number of people living in poverty in Kenya. As of 2018, there were 17 million people living in poverty in Kenya. And it's surprising, the number of people who live in poverty is higher in urban areas than in rural areas. One, because of agriculture. It seems people in the rural areas, if they get supported, they can actually up their standards of living. So I think we need to look at that, because these numbers are very worrying. If people are getting poorer and poorer every day in the urban cities, and a lot of people are coming to the cities, wanatafuta kazi, wanatafuta opportunity, because wanatoroka kule nyumbani, there isn't. And again, look at these numbers. Over 84% of the people who are unemployed are the youth. So where do you want these people to go? I think it's a very difficult situation we are in.
Joe? I think we have to, when you hear that the economy is growing at whatever percentage, and at the same time companies are shutting down, at the same time everywhere you turn, people are saying, oh, hakuna pesa, I don't know what's going on. So it seems to me that the question becomes, which economy is growing, whose economy is growing?
For who?
Because, I mean, an economy such as ours has many economies in there, and there are many different types of people with their own little economies. And so there are economies that are growing with this economy. I mean, some people's economy is growing and others...
I see what you're trying to say.
You understand what I'm saying? And so that is actually, for me, where the question must be. How can it be? It's a paradox that you're saying the economy is growing, and that is usually what the problem is with all these percentages that we are given.
Yeah.
Because if you have a country where less than 10% of the population owns 90% of the wealth, then you have to be careful with percentages, because if you're told that it's growing at 5% or 6%, then you have to look within that 6% who is actually in there. There could be a lot of people whose economy actually has declined 20%, and that is what we have seen. For people who have lost their jobs, has their economy really grown? If you were to talk to them, because an economy growing is supposed to mean a trickle down, that I can feel it in my pocket. Otherwise, I don't care if it grows or it doesn't.
By whatever number.
And that is what we are dealing with, that a number of people are only hearing on their radios and watching on TV some figures being bandied about. But when they go to their local supermarket with that 500, or if they go to the kiosk with that 100 shillings, what they could buy last year compared to what they can buy today, it's worlds apart. And that is how, for them, they would measure whether the economy is growing or not. And for me, that is what we need to be focusing on as a country. The least of us, what are they feeling?
I think the paradox also, before Lina says something, is that a report that was released today shows that Kenya has actually improved in the ease of doing business index. They've gone up 5 places.
The challenge with the ease of doing business is it only takes a look at those who are in formal employment and in the corporate sector. And remember, those who are formally employed in this country are up to about 3 million. So if you're trying to look at what's happening within that sector and forgetting that our economy is largely informal, then, you know, that ease of doing business ranking isn't, you know, too much
and
for the majority.
And the fact that it is easy to do business doesn't mean that the business is going to make any money. It doesn't mean that you... It probably just means it's easy to register a company. It means to get a license here and there.
But how to sustain that business?
It's a totally different story.
Right,
and even the accuracy of that, Joe, cannot be verified, whether it's really become easy to register a company or to actually get a business going. And the question is, what business that you're talking about? Now, even not long ago, former CJ William Mutunga described our economy as a bandit economy. And that is a heavy and loaded statement. In the fullness of time, we come in and weigh what exactly that meant, and there's a lot that falls in place. One, for example, is the level of corruption between 2013 and 2017. You see the new energy to fight corruption, the drive by the president, the drive by the DCI, the drive by the Attorney General's office, and even the DPP's office. All this is informed by the realization that corruption had gone so far that it was not going to be sustainable for the country. It was singularly responsible for bringing down the economy. Corruption had become the main way of growth. You know, long replaced agriculture and horticulture and things like that. There are a lot of millionaires, if not billionaires, that have been created between 2013 and now. What have they been feeding off? They've been feeding off public resources. Money has not been going to the right places. Now, there's something Kenyans now call, and it runs around, a situation on the ground.
We took a ground different.
We took a ground different. When we saw people in Grogan, Kirinyaga Road, complaining, going to, threatening to do protests, these are people we have not seen for very, many years. They have never needed to do that. But now they're feeling the pinch. Now, there's something else we need to point out here, because this means a lot of trouble. The new economic platforms, like horticulture, which landed in this country with a bang. It's supposed to be a really niche kind of business. Horticulture too is suffering. It's going down. Now, Francis, the whole of last weekend before that, we were discussing KTD and the issues around the tea sector. The problem, and the greatest problem that we are facing right now, is the apparent casualness in how we are handling our economy. I'll point out that it's not normal for a country that takes its economy seriously to have an acting finance minister, an acting cabinet secretary for finance. You don't joke with finance ministry. There are ministries that you don't joke with.
Finance, security,
foreign affairs,
education,
those key ministries. Yeah. Now, by President Uhuru Kenyatta having an acting finance cabinet secretary, what are his powers? What are his substantive powers? Is he on waiting mode? You know what acting means. You are not confirmed. So whose vision is driving the Ministry of the Treasury right now? There's just a lot of casualness because we seem to leave even the economy to natural forces. It's a bit like the floods, let's hope that it will rain and the economy improves, and let's hope the harshness of drought will not kill the economy. We are a God's economy, basically.
I look at it, it's a fatal concussion in the sense that you have companies that are shutting down, you have jobs that are being lost every other day, you have people in business who are struggling every day, they cannot make ends meet. I mean, I was telling Jamila another day of a friend of mine who has a shop in Kirinyaga Road, and he was telling me that he imported spare parts last year in November. And up to June this year, he still had a huge stock. Yet, previously, he would deal with that entire stock in about 2-3 months. And by the time he's done with it, there's another load on the way.
Yeah.
So if you have 5 million shillings worth of stock sitting there, nobody to buy it, and you're paying rent and you're paying workers, then it means, he was telling me he has 2 shops. He had to close one, bring the supplies to another shop. That means the people who are operating the other shop had to go home. Basically shows you how serious this kind of a situation is. And not even that, look at the people who have been trading with county governments. How many have been declared bankrupt? Go to most of the...
It's worse than that.
Go to dailies and look at the number of motor vehicles and houses that are being auctioned every other day. That does not say
that actually now we say that
in a good state.
The only business that seems to be doing well is the auctioneering business.
Business. Here is the challenge. Allow me to say this, because you just mentioned the issue of money flowing in the economy. I mean, there's a serious issue of liquidity, and anyone will tell you money isn't flowing. There's a number of reasons, and you just alluded to one of those. When both national and county governments owe suppliers and contractors, who, by the way, are the SMEs and the small businesses who are encouraged to do business with government. According to, is it a World Bank study, it's about 400 billion shillings that is owed by both national and county governments. When they're not paying, you recall Uhuru Kenyatta, the president, said, that they were going to make sure that they paid out those before the end of the last financial year. Now, what has happened? Government isn't paying suppliers. These suppliers, therefore, have to make those tough choices of closing shop, of sending people home. So there's a problem with liquidity in the country. What happens? They try to go to the banks to perhaps get a line of credit. They're unable to do that because the government is borrowing domestically and therefore crowding them out. Banks would rather deal with government. The interest rate cap, in as much as it was supposed to make things cheaper, has not. I once tried to go for a loan. The interest rates that I was getting were much higher because I'm considered a higher risk due to the interest rate cap. So you have the interest rate cap in place, you have a liquidity problem, you have government that is not paying suppliers, and in an economy like this one, by the way, if an economy is growing, one of the key indicators is jobs, which is that people are moving from informal jobs to formal. In this country, informal jobs are the default because you've had a job, you can't find one, or you lose it and you go back into the informal sector. Now, that is a big recipe for disaster. We should be moving from the informal to the formal. In this country, we're moving from the formal into the informal. Think of those 4,300 people. Where are they going to go? They're going to go right back into the informal sector. There's not enough investment being done in the informal sector in this country.
When you talk about people losing their jobs, look at it this way. When you go to the supermarket, what you could buy with 1,000 shillings a few years back, you'll probably not be able to buy the 5, 6, 7, 8 items you used to. And you need those things. And the other thing is you don't have extra money coming in. Pesa ni zile tulizokuwa nazo, but needs keep changing. Bei ya bidhaa inaongezeka kila siku. In fact, I was reading somewhere that this day's line of credit ni kwa ule jamaa wako wa kiosk yule pale nyumbani. You keep talking that person, nipatie maziwa, nipatie sukari, nipatie nitakulipa. That's the guy you go to be able to survive. And have you seen how much loans we get on apps, how much people are going that route because they have no choice. You have an outstanding loan at the bank you're unable to pay, but then now this one's the mara moja unapatia so that you're able to at least survive. Now when you see that, it is worrying because you don't have hakuna pesa inaingia, you still have to feed your children, you have to pay rent, you have to eat. And when we reach that point where you're scared about where you'll get your next meal from, despite maybe having a job because you have to pay loans, you have to pay a hospital bill, you have to pay school fees, then we're going a very bad direction.
I just want to point out one thing which I think would be important for recovery. The economy also feeds on things like confidence, just generation of an environment that inspires confidence. And people will start wanting to invest their money in the country, and suddenly things can start looking up. But confidence must be created. And that is what the government should concentrate on doing. And how should it do that? First of all, but by having a face that leads the economic recovery. Our economic management right now is faceless. Who is the face of our economic management? You know, when you look back in the gone by years, I look at the Moi year and I remember Finance Minister Simon Nyachai taking responsibility and telling a group of investors and a gathering of parliamentarians in Mombasa that the economy was broke. It was broke in ICU. World over, there must be a phase that leads the economy. The Tony Blair and Gordon Brown combination, we always saw Gordon Brown as the face of the economic management. Who is Uhuru Kenyatta's economic manager?
Yeah, the one who used to be is now in the dock.
And we haven't even spoken about the debt situation that a lot of people are raising alarm bells around. I mean, from 2013 to now, we have moved from 1.8 trillion when this government came in, and now we have 5.8, approaching
almost tripled.
6 trillion in those few years. And we are in a situation where just the other day, Parliament essentially gave permission, because that debt ceiling basically is Parliament saying you can actually borrow up to 9 trillion, which is quite frankly almost the same as the size of this economy, because at the last check, I think the GDP of this country was 10 trillion. So you are basically have permission to borrow as much as the entire economy of this country. And coupled with that is the fact that the economy is not generating enough revenue to be able to service those loans that we have. The IMF recommends that we should be spending about 30% of our revenue in servicing debt. By 2017, it was 42% or something like that, which means that we are already over and above what we should be spending every year in servicing those debts. KRA basically not meeting the revenue targets, and so you see all manner of things going on, trying to tax everything that is available. And so even the small businesses that we've been talking about, they are feeling the pinch that at a time when we should be saying like the taxes should be lower and spread over a number of people, the few people who are doing something are the ones who are actually being taxed almost to death because they can't find some guys who are evading tax around town. So it's a very, very deadly mix that I think we need to be concerned about. And if we don't do something about it, I think the next couple of years will not be looking very good at this rate.
And Joe, you mentioned tax, and I just want to quickly say something about the missing of targets that KRA keeps talking about. It's not about collection anymore. There's nothing to collect. Have they ever considered that actually that's it?
That those targets should not have been there in the first place.
Yes, there's no much to collect. Because have you seen how many job losses? How many companies have laid off people? Every laid off person is payee gone. Those are taxes gone. And I think KRA needs to start factoring, basically live in this environment and be aware of what is going on. The economy is not in good shape.
Talking about collection of taxes, there was also another collection that was happening on a while ago, collection of views by BBI, And so the collection is over. and what was collected has been analyzed and put into a report, Building Bridges Initiative report. It awaits the return of President Uhuru Kenyatta, maybe over the weekend, probably next week or thereabout, I suspect Thursday, that report will be handed over to the two.
That next Thursday we'll be discussing BBI on the news gang.
You can take that to the nearest bank. They will be, President Uhuru Kenyatta and ODM leader Raila Odinga will be receiving that report. But even before they do so, there's a lot of discussion about what is contained in that report, rightly or wrongly. And the president and the former prime minister were speaking over the weekend in Mombasa about that report and about the entire BBI process. Here is what they had to say. Well, those are the pictures of the BBI team. I'll be showing you sound bites from the president and the former prime minister. But as we do that, Joe, why the discussion, or rather, why the talk of the contents of the BBI, yet the report is not out there, or the report is there but not yet there?
Well, I mean, at the end of the day, this is a political situation. This is a political, BBI was always a political event. Remember, it was born out of the handshake by two leading politicians in the country. And there has been a sense within Jubilee, especially, that the handshake and everything that comes out of it was meant to torpedo Deputy President's attempt at the presidency in 2022. So what are we seeing? We are seeing a situation where the politicians allied to the Deputy President naturally feel that finally this BBI thing is coming. Finally, this plan, the grand plan that may have been behind the handshake, is coming forward. And now that there might be something that finally begins that the final phase of what they see as an anti-Ruto strategy pushed by Raila Odinga. That is what they keep saying. So it seems to me that the president raised the stakes. Remember when he was going to launch this project that we just talked about at the opening of the show, that he actually said that tunarudi na BBI. That, in my mind, actually said many things, because you can only come back with BBI either because you are going to be collecting views in the manner that Ekuru Aukot did, or that somehow you go through parliament and then come back now to campaign in form of a referendum. So it seems to me that whatever happens, the president is saying, we'll need to speak to you as the people, so that whatever outcome is there from BBI can then become reality. Because as it is, we all know that the BBI was not founded in law in the sense of a body that can generate, say, a bill or something that will have legal force. So they basically are a task force that will then recommend certain things that then have to find a way of entering the legal framework of the country, either through a parliamentary initiative as envisaged in 256, Article 256, or they will have to then now go the Punguza Mizigo route to 257 and try and get their million signatures or whatever, which I think they can get easily, and then now go through the county assemblies with whatever recommendations, which, as they indicated, will be radical, which to me says referendum.
Linus, look at it this way. It's not so much about the recommendations in the BBI report, because it will be a report and not a bill or any other format, but the next challenge of implementation of the recommendations and the politics around that.
We saw the sparks today, Francis. There was a section of members of parliament from Mount Kenya region that held a press conference to basically reject what was being speculated out here, because we don't have the report, we don't know what's in the report. But what was reported in the media today was rejected by those members of parliament.
Parliamentary system.
Yes. The irony is this BBI, it was supposed to reduce political competition and ethnic grouping and things like that. Look at the patterns of reactions, even though this is still at just speculation stage, because we do not know what BBI has recommended. So it's going to be very interesting going forward. If indeed what sections of the media reported today is what the BBI is going to propose, then you can already see what pattern it's going to take. And at this stage, rejection as at now.
You know, speaking about this, during SEMA today, we discussed about the BBI. And we spoke to some residents of some particular different areas in the country. And the one thing they kept saying is, mimi sikuwa kwa vikao. Hakuna mmoja mwenye alisema alikuwa kwa vikao. I think maybe before we continue, let's listen to what they had to say. And then we will continue the discussion.
The public participation was somehow minimal. But the little ones who gave their views on behalf of Kenyans, they were there to represent us. The issue should be supported not as a way of creating jobs for the few ones, but at least as a way of maintaining peace and unity for the little Kenyans who are around.
Hatujahusishwa chochote na hatujaona hata watu wenye wanakuja sokoni, anakuja uliza sisi mnaendeleaje hata sokoni huko, hatujawahi kuona hao watu. Sasa hata sisi tunajiuliza hii ni nini na hatujasikia, hatujawahi kuona, hatuelewi ni nini. Na inaendeleaje? Hakuna mtu amehusisha sisi. Tunasikia tu watu wakisema. Hatujawahi kuona. Sasa naomba kama serikali wakuja atuelezee vizuri, wakae chini na atupeleke kwa utaratibu. Hapana harakisha sisi.
Kitu itafanya mimi niangushe kitu kwa sababu mimi sijachangia, hata watu yangu ya Kapsabet hawajawahi changia. Na nafikiri wako hapa wataulizwa maswali. Tunataka ile kitu kama ni katiba kubadilisha, tuhakikisha kwamba kila mtu mwananchi wameulizwa.
Umesikia anataka kila mtu waulizwe, because this question of who sat and gave their views to BBI. There are those who claim that it was choreographed. There are those who say that wale watu walifika mbele
but honestly it was there.
But this is the thing, Joe. Despite all that, hopefully ile report itatolewa itakuwa ya maoni ya watu ambao ni wa Kenya, because look, that is just a bit of what we sampled, but a lot of what we had on the ground was that hakuna mtu aliniita, mimi si kwenda mkutano wa BBI. So wale watu ambao walikuwa pale wakitoa maoni walikuwa wananchi.
Is it getting 100% of everybody's views? You know,
but a sample. At least
these are true Kenyans we've just seen speaking here, because they have switched to political mode immediately. And depending on the region they are in, you can tell the positions they are taking. So Punguza had their challenges. Now it's BBI's turn on the table, and there'll be a lot of political management to be carried out if the BBI report would be adopted. Because look, people who obviously saw the BBI team in their nearest town, and I was saying, no, I didn't see it. Remember St. Peter and Jesus just before the... Yes, like, no, I've never heard of that. What's that?
We need to finish this. As we finish, Klein says, BBI is like a newborn baby. Everyone is waiting to know, boy or girl. Question that is on everyone's mind, including those against it. Maybe it will help when Wanjiku get a job. I don't know.
Let me pose this around here as we finish. There's some things that you can outrightly expect from this kind of a report. And I have not seen the report. Let me start there. I have not seen it. But there are some obvious things that most likely I would think will be there. Number one, if it is about the question of inclusivity, maybe, you remember there's that report by NCIC, National Cohesion and Integration Commission, that was then led by Francis Ole Kaparo. It came up with a list of the tribes and how they populated in the public service. And there were certain recommendations that were made there. I would not be surprised if BBI recommends that that report be implemented in full. There's also that question of who should be in the cabinet. There has been a discussion around, should cabinet ministers also come from parliament? Because of that question that Lina's raised here another day, that our cabinet ministers need some political muscle, because at times there's some decisions that they will make that will not be very sound politically. And the thinking of politicians in such scenario is very different from how a technocrat would look at it. So I will not be surprised once again if there is a recommendation for cabinet ministers to come from parliament, either entirely or a good chunk of them. And maybe on that question of whether we will change the system of government, what if BBI recommends to the president and the former prime minister that it's up to you guys to decide?
Well,
there's a
I have not read the report.
There's a tweet here which is rather interesting. After all that discussion about the expressway, someone here called Kamakil simply asks, Jubilee has anti-malaria drains. Who supplied them and for how much?
Well.
Francis, to your question, yes. Very, very quickly. That will be a very, very unusual kind of proposal if the BBI team turns to Uhuru Kenyatta and Raila Odinga and tells them to decide. Basically, they'll be throwing the two principles under the bus, the two handshake principles under the bus, because the very purpose of look, politicians usually know what they are looking for, but they
look for a formula.
They look for a formula. Yeah. So, and they must have told them, these are our thoughts. Go and try and actualize them out there. So it's very unlikely that the team will come back and tell them, it's up to you.
Okay, this is the answer. And
there's no surprise. Actually, if there are people who will not act surprised next week when the report comes to them, is the president and the former prime minister. I'm sure by now they have been well briefed by the people who they appointed to BBI. I'm sure they have been giving them daily briefs. We
need to finish. So we need to finish now.
I just hope when the report is out, itakuwa ile instance ya fulani amesoma ni sawa tu. Everyone will read and understand. Okay, it's time for the final word.